Hi, everybody. Welcome to the astrological aspect of the Artemisia immersion. Today, I'm going to be talking to my good friend and astrologer and mythologist, Kelley Hunter. Hi, Kelley. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you.
Great. I'm super excited about this talk because we're going to be focusing today on the astrological aspect, particularly the lunar aspect of the Artemisias, who are very lunar-oriented plants. And for people who did the dandelion immersion before, remember we talked a lot about the more solar aspects and the cat energy of the dandelions. But today we're going to be doing probably the counterpart, which is the more feminine yin lunar side of the plant work, which is going to help balance out the dandelion cat energy we had before. So we've been doing a little bit of a deep dive, me and Kelley, over the last week or so, looking into the various aspects that we think link the Artemisias to Black Moon Lilith. So I think we're going to be starting there today. So I'm going to hand over to Kelley for the first part of this particular piece, this transmission for the Artemisia immersion. And we're going to start to draw some of the correlations between this powerful plant family, the Artemisias, and then Black Moon Lilith, and also the nodes of the moon, because this is an important piece of what's going on right now. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the expert and let Kelley guide us through the world of Black Moon Lilith and how this relates to the planets and the moons.
Again, I have to say, I'm no expert, especially on Lilith. If you say you're an expert, she's going to bust you. So, it's a mystery. It's very mysterious, and it doesn't that hold true for the Artemisias. And everybody knows an Artemisia, they just don't know that they know. and I love that the lunar world, of course, it's like your nightlife, it's like your dream world, it's like, the other side of the day. And one of the reasons that the moon and the Black Moon Lilith seem connected is because that Black Moon named Lilith is very intimately connected to the Earth Moon cycle, and along the way, the nodes of the moon. So the Black Moon is the second focal point. So if the moon went around the Earth in a perfect circle, there, the Earth would be in the middle, but it's not. All orbits are elliptical, which are elongated. And so there are two mathematical focal points which define the orbit of the moon. Sometimes it's closer to us, we get supermoons. Sometimes it's further away. And so it's not a regular, it's a car in a race course going in and out. And so the Black Moon is the second focal point. It's not a body at all. I don't know why it's called a moon, because it's not. And it's just this mathematical point that's so intimately connected to the Earth-Moon orbit. So if the moon is the womb of the mother that incarnates you on Earth, to me, the Black Moon is something invisible, compelling, involved with your incarnation, perhaps more on a soul level. What does your soul desire? What desire brings your soul here to embody what, to experience what? It's often said in esoteric traditions that we can make a lot more spiritual advance on this dense plane that we can in some of the angelic realms. So there's this compelling urge and mystery connected to the Black Moon. So if the moon, there you're born, and we have all this early impact from our parents and our birth process and all of our experiences really early on, even in the womb, when our soul is awake, we're getting all of these early impressions that kind of define our sense of who we are, along with the DNA packaging. And so there's the moon, and already that's a mystery that goes way, way back, but the Black Moon brings in a soul aspect that can be very negative or very positive, can be brilliant, in fact. But the negative part is if we're too invested or we have too much self-identity in the moon realm with the DNA packaging, with the family dynamic, then there's something else in us that is not coming through and being expressed. That's something more essential and truer and soul-centered in ourselves. So the black moon can bust you if you're in your ego, if you're coming from your moon, and the old patterns and habits that come from a kind of lunar programming, in fact, that, is the package we're born into. And then, here's the black moon seeking to tap us into something more deep and essential in ourselves.
Could we say then, it's interesting what you're saying, that maybe in some ways the traditional moon, like you said, the womb space, that's bringing through the DNA, the ancestral bloodline lineages, and then the black moon is perhaps bringing through more our soul forces and our soul lineages, and they combine because we are made up of matter and non-physical matter. So could that be one way of understanding it?
Yes, that's a really good way to summarize it. And I also think, though, that the moon, through the nodes of the moon, your destiny line, the south node is like all these, what they call sanskaras in Hindu, all these sanskaras from past lives as well, that can often be connected to your ancestry. And then, you're getting the right family for this whole package to unwind, give you the right kind of start for what you're here to do. But the soul wants to express something more deep and essential in the awakening process that the moon doesn't really give us, maybe except through dreams or, those nuances or those mysteries or attending to that other part of our life. It can make a big difference if you're born with the sun out or the moon out.
Right, of course, that's very true. And when I'm doing healing work on people's in the quantum space, I often observe like what's in the field to the left and what's in the field to the right. So anything on the left-hand side is normally this life, feminine, but also ancestral and blood. And anything on the right-hand side can be related to a masculine wounding or trauma, but is normally related to past lives and soul traumas. So depending where I find things positioned in a client's field, I can often tell, is this something from the family ancestral line, or is this something from the soul line? Sometimes the two cross over. We have been some of our blood ancestors, and sometimes we've reincarnated into the same family, which can get a little messy sometimes. But sometimes the two things can be also completely separate. So I find this is an interesting aspect of this.
Yeah, some is woven very conveniently, and some, is those other aspects of ourselves, other experiences or our star system, heritage, or however we want to look at that.
Right.
So the black moon, it's this other thing, another aspect of the cosmic feminine.
Right.
So it's if it's about soul essence, it also it's very mysterious because it's not a point. It's not a moon. It's just this mathematical, vortex, portal. It's not a portal. I wouldn't call it a portal, but something there that is meaningful. So the thing about it is that in astrology, there was way more written in, say, like Europe. And I think because they have a lot more Black Madonnas there. So, and the way one measures the black moon is a little tricky because it's not an object. It's based on the Earth-Moon orbit. Often, it's going to be where the moon is farthest, when the moon is farthest from the Earth. So it can be more far out into the dark space, but there are different ways of measuring the black moon because it goes retrograde a lot. So it wiggles around like a belly dancer. And so there's the mean black moon that measures the movement through the zodiac going forward, its mean average motion. This we also do for the nodes of the moon. Astrologers can determine a true node or the mean node. That's a choice we get. It's just with Lilith, the choice can be quite different. The true black moon, which takes into account its constant retrogrades, can be in a completely different sign than the mean black moon. They can be up to 30 degrees apart. So you have one in a house. You can have them either very close together, or you can have them quite far apart, which is very interesting. And it's still, I keep thinking about, well, what does that mean if you have them both together or apart? So, you know, that's one of the mysteries of the black moon, but they both are valid in experience. And, you know, so I always like to, when I'm talking about them with people, I like to have both of them on hand because they can do different things in your whole chart. They can rearrange your chart in all sorts of different patterns. And so there's no choosing one over the other, but, you know, there we are, the mystery of the black moon and the complexity of it.
So what we're dealing with here is a very elusive, witchy kind of character energy that doesn't even want to be pinned down into a specific moment in time, but does like to go far out into space, but also likes to go backwards and forwards.
Somebody aligned it with like the particle or the wave. You know, is light a particle or a wave? And it's both, depending on your point of view. And the black moon can kind of suggest that kind of paradox or that kind of complexity. And they both work. If you have them in different signs, you want to explore them both. If you have them together, you are like, you know, it is strong point in your chart. And it can be where you get off track. It can be where you get off track. So, you know, it's especially in these times of the arising of the feminine consciousness, it can be very useful to include Black Moon Lilith in your chart to see what it's doing and how it's part of what I call the cosmic feminine triple goddess of the moon, the Venus, and the black moon, you know, in terms of making choices in your life and the influences. There is, though, and this came to me when I was thinking more about the Artemisias in particular, was that there is another, well, actually, there are 4 astronomical things named Lilith. But the other one I want to mention in this context is the dark moon or the shadow moon, or some people call it the Waldemuth moon, because that mathematician determined the orbit of this dark moon, this reportedly observed satellite of the Earth that we don't see because it doesn't reflect the light of the sun. That's why it's called a shadow moon. It absorbs the shadows. And I've come to think of this as, and it's farther out than the moon we usually think of. And apparently there are others that I saw a whole book on all these others, one called Lulu, one called Edith, you know, and there was the dark moon Lilith. And so if it's another satellite that goes around the Earth, that's another influence that captures the shadows.
Wow.
And so to me, it's like, I imagine like the soul comes down through the spheres, the planetary spheres. That's an old tradition in esoteric. And, you know, so we come down, we're getting closer to the Earth, and we get into the lunar realm, and we start picking up like psychic cobwebs, and they stick to us, and they come in. It's this sticky astral stuff, and we come in and we've got this stuff that we picked up somewhere.
That's kind of like the incarnation of the soul forces. I mean, when we learn in Buddhism, when we consciously die, we have to release the soul forces, or the inner elements of air, fire, water, and earth, in a certain order out through the gateways, and that's how we cross consciously. So the same must be true on the way in. So we're collecting our karmic stickiness, because we've all got that coming into this realm, and that's what's mapped out with our astrology or our numerology. That's the blueprint laid bare. But at some point during the incarnation process into the womb, we have to collect our karmic stuff, our samskaras, you could say. So that must be how it happens.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yes, that reminds me. So if the dark moon, it could be more collective in a kind of way, the shadow moon. But also, it could be, say, like, if your mother had an abortion before you were born, and there's some cleaning up in the womb you have to do, that could be like shadow moon stuff. And it's very connected to your incarnation still, the moon and the earth, but it's another lunar influence that's more secreted, or it's kind of like a mirror world in a way, or the world of fairies, spelled F-A-E-R-I-E, which is a magical world, which the Artemisias can certainly live in, with these kind of elves and gnomes and astral kind of entities and plant divas and whatever else is going on in this invisible mirror aspect of the world we live in, on earth.
What that makes me think about a lot is or the upper world. And if you look in the 9 worlds of the Norse traditions, Elfenheim, which is the other world, the world of the elves, or the world of the ancestors, is a very yin, feminine, pre-solar earth.
Now, were you connecting that to the underworld? Were you saying the underworld and the upper world, or what were you saying there? We lost a few words.
So if we have the upper world of the celestial beings, the angelic beings, we have the middle world, which is our world, and we have the lower world, which is the underworld. The other world of the fairies, the fae, the elves, particularly the elven beings, this is a world of the pre-physical beings. It's much more Lemurian, I think, much more Atlantean.
Yes.
And this was the pre-solar earth. This is how I was taught. So in the U mysteries, the way that we were taught was that there was a pre-solar earth that was bathed in Saturnian light, which was very twilight. This is what we would now call the other world. It sits alongside our world and transcends all of the other worlds. So it has its higher dimensions, but it also has its lower aspects. But this is also the world of the elves, and it's what we would call in the Norse traditions, Elfenheim. So it's a kind of a world that sits alongside our world, but is its own world in itself, but is very, very lunar, very yin, very feminine, and actually quite hive mind. So when we talk about his story, that's more the physical incarnation. Prior to that was her story, which was when we were much more yin and collective. So we had to go through a collective experience into a more physical yang, solar, individuated experience. And now we're going into our story, which is the amalgamation of the lunar and the solar into a much more complete human being that's embodied from the higher dimensional realms.
Oh, lovely. Yeah.
Makes sense, right? To me, anyway. So I'm wondering, these shadow moons, I'm wondering also if we could understand them as maybe being the ones that we can't see, but maybe are there. I'm sure NASA must know about these, right? But maybe they're kind of collective unconscious. They're representing the unseen because we know that they're there, but we can't see what are they. So I'm thinking maybe there's some aspect of the collective unconscious. If there's more than one, maybe they represent different aspects of the collective unconscious.
I think that is true of the different realms of, say, even the planets. We've got the moon is very intimate to our system here on Earth. It's, the moons are part of the Earth. And so then we go into different planetary spheres, and then we go to the outer planets. Well, then we've got the asteroid belt, we've got the outer planets, we've got the new Kuiper belt objects that we've been discovering that are really opening our consciousness toward the stellar realms. So
without wanting to confuse our audience today with too many moons, because it seems like we've already introduced quite a few
already, right? The twin black moon, the true black moon, and the dark or shadow moon. Yeah.
Right. You know, you've got me super interested in the shadow moon. And of course, one of the interesting things that we've been talking about, slight sidestep here, but it's relevant, is of course the Artemis rocket that has now been cancelled twice. Now, maybe by the time everyone gets to see this piece, because we're recording a little bit before the immersion starts, maybe the rocket's taken off. Who knows what is that rocket going to do in space?
Maybe when you launch the Artemisias series, the rocket will launch along.
Well, who knows what's on the rocket? I'm wondering whether the rocket's being stopped, because maybe, I mean, it's NASA, so I don't imagine there's anything too too positive going on with that. Maybe they're going to look for the shadow moons. Who knows?
Well, that's named Artemis is interesting right there. You know, I came across something naturally on, you know, when I was on the internet that was talking about Artemis as the deity that the Amazon culture was most attuned to. And that's pre-Greek. You know, the Artemis, you know, the Amazon culture is known for being a woman's culture and, you know, for being really good warriors. But that, you know, I think if they were from Northern Africa, which some people say, or near the Black Sea, or, you know, kind of in various areas, you know, the Greeks didn't give them a very good reputation. You know, there's a lot of the Greek interpretation that we need to review and revise, especially in relation to the feminine.
Oh. So if I've got this correctly, what we're suggesting here is that the Amazonian female warrior culture could have come from North Africa, could be Nubian or Egyptian or something in origin, maybe then went to South America, but then somehow we have Artemis appearing later in the chronology, we could say, as a Greek goddess. So that seems a little confusing, but what we're suggesting is that the being that is Artemis is actually pre-Greece, ancient Greece.
Yes, and may have been a symbol that really spoke to a woman's culture and a woman's consciousness in a way that, you know, in the Greek, she was the twin sister of Apollo. You know, she had the bow and arrow. She was the goddess of the wilderness. I think that really fits with the Artemisias, and the wild animals, the wild, you know, earth. Then that's very Lilith too, by the way. You know, it's kind of primordial. That's a good word to use.
So we've introduced the moons, and now we're introducing Artemis, which is a little bit, we're basically building the jigsaw as we like to do on our shows here, Kelley. So maybe what would be nice now is to bring in the personality of Lilith herself and start putting that into the picture, because I think that would be kind of useful then to see how is it going to affect the piece.
Well, the Lilith aspect is very impersonal. It is as it is what she says. So no judgment, no concepts. She's like the Tibetan Dakini, which comes in and blows your mind out of concepts, out of the way you think it is, your belief systems, so that you have a spacious Buddha mind and can see reality more clearly. And so, you know, that's where the moon, like, I don't like that. No, I don't want to go there. It doesn't feel safe to me. You know, and so many artists were fascinated, have been, still are fascinated by Lilith. And so many of them, and, you know, she got very popular in the second half of the 1800s, along with the drink absinthe. And she was written about, she was painted, she was, you know, in poetry. And the dark moon poetry, the shadow moon poetry was more like Byron, or, you know, there was a poet in California that was really, really, whatever he was taking, he was really out there, you know, in the realms. Then we had, here's from Byron, his darkness poem. The waves were dead, the tides were in their grave. The moon, their mistress, had expired before. Darkness, she was the universe.
Hmm. Hmm.
So there's that, it's like the, what's in the darkness that can guide us. There's a light in the darkness. So I wonder how that relates to the Artemisias and their healing quality.
So there's quite a few things that are coming to me there, and I'm going to answer the whole piece about the Victorian period and absinthe, because I've deep dived with Wormwood quite extensively on that piece. But just also what's appearing to me in my mind is the dark half of the yin yang with the light, the small circle of light. And I often feel the Artemisias represent that side of the yin yang. They take their light into the darkness and illuminate the darkness to show what is in the shadows that needs to be lifted into the light. And from a healing perspective, that would be for release. So I often feel that that's the gift of the Artemisias, is they take their light into the darkness to help illuminate it. There's quite a few healing plants, but particularly because the Artemisias are very witchy. I also want to comment on the side, I often have referred to the Artemisias as being Raffle Dakinis, because I also have, a trajectory in Tibetan Buddhism. Maybe some of our audience won't know what are those, but they're also a kind of a powerful series of goddess deities within Tibetan Buddhism that are of the light, but also have that wrathful destruction sometimes that is needed to transform. And again, the Artemisias embody this sometimes because one of their major functions is realignment. And if you have things in your life that are not aligned, maybe your work, your partner, other aspects of your life, if you start working with any of the Artemisias, particularly the Vulgaris, the mugwort is very strong with this, they will immediately show you by rattling your cage in those places where you're not in alignment. So often for the first part of a piece of work with an Artemisia plant, it can be a little, oh my gosh, like what's going on? My life is imploding. And then the Artemisia is like, no, it's not imploding. I'm showing you where you're not aligned. And if you're not aligned, it's going to be uncomfortable while I straighten you back out. So that's often the first part of the alignment process.
And so Lilith, that is so Lilith.
Right, I figured. So, and people can often mistake this as like, oh, I don't like this plant. It's making me not feel very good. And it's like, yeah, it's because you're not coherent. The good thing about it is that when the Artemisias go to work, if you let them do their work, like all plant medicines, it can be done really quickly because they're also very tantric. And so this is the gift again of the Dakinis, of the witches, that when you work with the tantric energy of transformation, through not having resistance, what can happen is that things can get transformed and aligned really quickly. And then the gifts that come with the alignment and the coherence start to manifest into your life. And again, if you're working with dandelion in the present moment in the heart, in conjunction, balancing your solar and lunar energies, then you start to come into a place of holistic coherence and wholeness, which I think is really, really beautiful. So I just wanted to answer those couple of points, but also, yeah, talking about absinthe, here's one of the interesting things, so if we think about the Victorian period, we have the writings of Mary Shelley with Frankenstein, Bram Stoker and Dracula. And, they often used to say that Van Gogh went mad and cut off his ear because he drank too much absinthe and because it's slightly hallucinatory.
There's a portrait of him by Degas, I think, sitting at a table drinking absinthe. Right.
So, however, this story was used, and this is where I think things get a little murky and a little more Artemisia. That story was used to show that Artemisia, or that the absinthe drink, was dangerous, and it got banned in Europe. Actually,
it was really bad alcohol. It was a very shoddy, quality of alcohol in part.
So that's the real truth of the situation. It wasn't the wormwood in the absinthe, that it's actually the shoddy quality of the alcohol that was giving all of these artists and poets the bad time. However, what I'd like to suggest is that because the Artemisias allow us to see very clearly, particularly wormwood, the absinthium species, it opens the third eye and it allows you to see the parasitic beings that exist in the astral planes around us all the time. So it made me wonder, like, is that what inspired Bram Stoker to write his book about vampires and other parasitic energies? Because we have a lot of that quite dark gothic novels that come out during that period.
Well, Lilith was also often personified as a vampire queen.
Right.
Very negative. Yeah. And then, there's the high side too. So is like Van Gogh's amazing, or the Impressionists, their awareness of the quality of light and that sort of thing.
So anyway, we're doing what we like to do, which is pulling lots of different threads to create a tableau that we can start to meet these beings, and also, the planets too. And there is a very, very strong illusory quality that sometimes can come with the moon. But the Artemisias really, when we allow them to open our third eye, dispel the illusions, and they allow us to see what is going on around us. And probably of all of the Artemisias, I would say that the absinthium, the wormwood, is what I would call the plant of truth. And when I first worked with that, she's like, do you really want to see, if I remove the veil, everything? I'm like, yeah, of course. This is when I was doing my first diet. And she's like, are you ready to see the truth? I'm like, yeah, I think so. She's like, I don't think you're ready to handle the truth yet. And I'm like, no, I think I am. So halfway through my initial wormwood diet, I suddenly started to see everything around me. And I realized that I was existing in a world of illusion and lies. And that everyone I encountered was either lying to me or to themselves, or in most cases, both. I'm like, wow, we're so imbued into a world of deception and lies that the wormwood, when we first open our eyes to it, it's shocking, which is, again, why I think some of these artists perhaps started to go a little crazy, because they were starting to see the world around them as it truly is, with the veil open. So, I think this is by way of a nice lead into the more murky aspects of what we want to talk about today with the nodes, which is about South Node in Scorpio, because the Artemisias are also very Scorpionic, really. So how do we want to slot this one in? Where the South Node is in Scorpio right now, isn't it?
Yes, and it will be for a while. It's maybe almost halfway through. I just want to read this one thing from George MacDonald, who wrote a lot of fairy tales for adults mainly. And he wrote a whole little novelette called Lilith, but he wrote this called, "Can that be true that loves the night? The darkness is the nurse of light. Can that be true with which mocks at forms? Truth rides abroad in shapeless storms." Yeah, he was very interested in shadow play, of firelight and such, and did a whole thing about we need to have places where there's no electricity. So anyway, so here we're back or to the nodes now, and you were saying it before, we need to release. The South Node is about what we need to release, and the South Node is what these sun scars from the past are coming through. So there are a lot of things that are coming through to each of us that we need to kind of bring the light into and release. It's like time for the snake to, shuffle out of its dead old skin. And we are certainly, called to do that on the collective and each of us on the personal, in order to bring more of the light forward. And, it's not easy with Scorpio, because you go down so deep and you need to know when to fly up. You mentioned eagle's perch a lot. The eagle, just needs to come out, before it gets pulled down. And it's so easy to get negative these days amidst all the fear porn out there. And, we just cannot let ourselves get pulled down. We need to kind of stay above that and keep our vibration really clear. And we get help from the North Node, which in Taurus means our bodies, grounding our bodies and developing our strength, so we can handle all of this intense feelings that come through in the sign of Scorpio. And some of these things are like, it's like, wow, did I get triggered? What just happened there? Kind of thing. And we get tested, and it's like, I had a couple of days last week where it was one test one day, and the next day a whole different test. But I managed to keep ahead of getting pulled down enough, but it took a lot of energy, Yeah, I had to go to bed early. I
think a lot of people have been feeling the intensity of the energy recently, which is also partly down to things like the coronal mass ejections and the solar flares and the plasma and everything else. But at the same time, I would like to suggest that, to me, South Node in Scorpio, and being Scorpio, I actually have North Node in Scorpio. So I'm going to have some sort of South Node return or opposition on my own north node. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out for me.
You're halfway through a karmic cycle.
Mm-hmm.
Take about 19 years to go around. So you're halfway around, which is the whole orbit of the black moon Lilith is a half of a nodal cycle.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Huh. So something there.
Yeah, there's something there.
But what I also get with the Artemisias and the South Node in Scorpio is this idea of like, okay, this is the past, it's the collective dirt, it's the stuff that's buried deep that needs to come up. And the great thing about Scorpio is that it has the capacity to be very tantric and transformational, and death and rebirth is a natural process of the Scorpio energy. So we're given, I feel, the opportunity to release really quickly with the South Node in Scorpio, the past sludge, yuck, shadow. I really think it's about shadow mostly, so that we can transform into what feels like the much more new age energy of North Node in Taurus, which talked about before, is grassroots up, it's organic, it's in the body, it's nature, it's fractal. So we're seeing the trajectory of what was the past that needs to be released, of course, but also the trajectory of a possible future. And so, you know, this is where I think things can get a little messy because it's Scorpio and it can be kind of murky. But at the same time, if we can sit in that murkiness for just a little bit, doesn't have to be too long, with the plants like the Artemisias, they can lift up our own individual shadow from the past, either this life or even previous lives, so that we can start to move more into that North Node in Taurus. Now, this is something that has to happen at the collective level as well, which is one of the main reasons the Artemisias have stepped forwards at this time to help us as individuals work for the collective as well by holding this immersion. So it's individual responsibility, but also this is a collective piece. And I kind of think that, you know, this is a critical moment for the shadow to be lifted up and released. And it's like, we just all have to be a little bit brave during this period and look into the stuff that we don't like, and then it's done. And that's the beautiful thing about Scorpio.
Before we even know it, we're going to experience it. So like I said, getting triggered, and it's like, you know, I just got angry at like, why, you know? So that kind of stuff is definitely one of those, you know, shadow moments where something came up and it's like, all right, I don't need to do that. I like the word alchemy for Scorpio because, you know, if you don't like feeling that way, change the way you're feeling, you know? Right. And we have a capacity to do that. And some of us can turn on a dime, depending, you know, on the depth of it and how deeply we're entangled, you know.
Well, this is where the higher aspect of Scorpio, the eagle, rather than the lower aspect, which is the scorpion, you know, we can ascend above that to our eagle's perch and observe our emotional 4D bodies, our emotional astral bodies getting triggered in these moments. And we then, perhaps again, with the help of someone like Dandelion, we have the opportunity from the non-dual perspective to say, do I choose to allow myself to get triggered by this? Or am I going to see why I got triggered and release that?
Why? Scorpio question, why?
Always, you know. And so what I've come to understand through my own practice and being a medicine person is that I've got so attuned to what's my energy and what's not, that when something comes in that triggers me, makes me feel anxious, makes me feel worried, the question is immediately, why? I felt fine 20 minutes ago, now I don't feel fine. What happened in between? So at the moment, it's not too much of a leap to say maybe you've been in town in a toxic place, in a toxic shop, in a toxic queue in the supermarket, and something came into your field. But if you have that level of sensitivity right now, which is part of the forced evolution that we're all going through, you're really getting to know quickly, oh my gosh, like what's that new frequency that's making me feel like this? And do I want to allow it to stay, or do I want to be a bit more scorpionic on my own ass and transform it out with alchemy? And I think that this is what South Node in Scorpio is giving everybody, is the chance to be your own inner alchemist so that you can release these unhelpful trigger frequencies.
And where is that in your chart? You know, you're gonna, is it seventh house relationship? Is it career area? You know, where is it activated there? And you can look back 19 years to the last time that these eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio were going on. You can track them back. But an eclipse is like, it's like an ending and a new beginning. It's like the energy shifts, and you can shift it more easily if you take advantage of the moment, you know, and you're willing to look, or you can resist And that, especially in Scorpio, the judgment or resistance can just make it harder to get out of the mud puddle.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's, I think, a really important point in this whole Artemisia immersion, is that if you can work with your astrology and with the plants, you can identify the places where that's likely to come up for you by looking into which house or which sign, is it sitting for you. And so then you can almost anticipate, or you can even start to be a little bit more proactive and say, okay, I want to see if there is anything that's in my south node, wherever that is in my chart, that needs to be released. And rather than wait for it to come and slap you around the face and kick you up the backside, it's just like, no, let me be proactive and start asking to release, which is something I've been doing for a while. And when we work like this, sure, the stuff comes up, but it's like, I chose for this to come up because I want it to go. And once it's gone, your field is lighter. So it's therefore much easier to absorb the light that's coming in. But if our field is dense and heavy because we have all this unresolved stuff from the past, then it's a lot more difficult, because it's trying to like light coming into a thick piece of concrete. It doesn't really work. So you need to loosen up that so that it releases, and then you are more of a light body.
Yeah, there's a bit of stubbornness to fixed signs, and Taurus and Scorpio are both fixed. They like go deeper and deeper and deeper. Like in Taurus, it's like the dandelion root that goes deep and deep, like the tree root that goes deep and deep and deep and deep, so it can be more productive. Scorpio goes like a deep sea diver way down there, and then you have to be careful coming up, or you can get the bends, yeah, the diving sickness. Yeah.
So, this is why we are working with plants like Artemisias, who really know how to hold a space for ourselves, how to deal particularly with past life shadow, particularly when it's of unhelpful, what we would call magic or bad magic. And there was certainly a lot of that in the world over the last 500 years. And there's still a lot of it in the world now. Much of the illusion that we see is really a form of unhelpful magic really being deployed against us to keep us in a place of being stupid or dumbed down somehow that we don't get to see. So to loop back to the absinthe, I would like to suggest that one of the reasons that they banned absinthe is because they were concerned that too many people might start to see exactly what's going on in the world around them. For exactly the same reason they banned Santa Maria or cannabis in the 20s, because if too many people are with that plant, they're going to go to higher mind and start questioning what the hell is going on in the 3D, 4D space. So these kind of more easy to access plants who have this capacity to shift us into a place of seeing have been made the villains for the last 100 years. And it's only in the last few years that both absinthe and cannabis have been somewhat freed up from their tag of illegality. So I find that kind of interesting too.
Yeah, absinthe was really abused because it was put together with bad alcohol, and it just, it was the demise of a lot of people. And so, that's abusing the herb, and it really has a healing potential. So, that's a healthy version of it could be interesting. And with any of this, you need to be careful. You need to know, like, choose to do it. And that right then is saying you're willing, and that then you have to be in that space, the black moon saying it is as it is. Don't try to make it into something it's not. Experience what you're experiencing. Don't get attached, which the moon can do. Or don't go back to old patterns, which also the moon can do. It's like dreaming at night, right? I woke up the other morning and I was like, I had to sort a few things out, because this is like, this dream isn't ending the way I want. Like, I got to get out of this before I wake up, kind of thing.
Right. I think that's a perfect analogy of where we all are right now. It's like, are we in some horrible nightmare dream space, or are we coming out of the dream space with the trajectory or the ending that we want? And I think that this is the big choice that during this immersion is actually going to come up with the Libra equinox. Again, this is a matter of choice. I just want to before we finish for this piece, just to loop back to the Black Moon Lilith, because there's two placements right now. Can you share with us where they are in the charts and how they might be playing out for the collective at this time?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of people use the mean Black Moon because it's the easiest one and it moves forward at a steady pace. So, let's just look at the new moon. on September 10th here. Is that okay? And
the full moon, you mean the full moon Pisces?
That's what I mean, new moon, full moon. Yeah, so we have the true black moon in Leo, and at about 5.5 Leo. It moves fast. So do you want to give me another date and we'll look at that and see how fast that's moving?
Okay, well let's have the date of the equinox, of the Libra equinox on the 22nd of September to see how has it moved from the full moon, which is 12 days before, almost 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah, actually it's 22nd, 23rd. So the true black moon is at 10, almost 11 Cancer. So it's gone back that to that far. That's like, 25 degrees.
Wow, that's a long way back in the space of 2 weeks.
Yes, exactly. It moves really fast.
Wow.
And the mean black moon on equinox is at 18 Cancer. So they're really close, right around that week. They're very close. So the closer they are, what does that mean? To me, it's like it's one, it's like, it's I don't want to call it a lightning bolt. I think it more like it's like a really strong beam of light, because you have that experience like right then and there. If you have, say, like what I used with the 5-degree Leo on the full moon on September 10th, and the black moon, the mean black moon is at 16 Cancer. That's like almost 30 degrees, 25, 30 degrees. So if you're going to have that whole area be encompassed by the two black moons positions. And so that whole time frame, a good week or more in there, is going to be engulfed in the black moon energy. It's not.
And when is that period is when, sorry, Kelley?
Well, we're looking at the 10th of September to
the 22nd.
The 22nd, 3rd, that where the true black moon goes back 25 degrees. So everything that's going on, especially in Leo or Cancer, or if you have things between 5 degrees of Leo back to 15 Cancer, you're going to have the black moon visit you quite a bit. And it's not easy in the sign of Cancer, because the Cancer is the sign of the moon. The mean black moon is in Cancer all the way through, the end of this year. But the true black moon keeps going back and forth. And it even is in, it's Cancer, Leo, Cancer, Leo, Cancer, Leo, all the way through the year. So isn't that what you were saying? The sunlight of the dandelion and the lunar of the Artemisias, that's going to be an interesting interplay during this time, according to the black moon, and the vibration that's so different between those two signs.
Without putting you on the spot, 'cause I'm not sure whether you have this information in front of you, but do you know if there's a day or a moment when the mean and the true actually align into the same degree? So we have a place of complete alignment between the two aspects.
Yes, that shouldn't really be too hard to figure out here. I'm looking at my ephemeris, which that's Bible for an astrologer. So
we haven't prepared for this. So I'm just putting Kelley completely on the spot here, because I'm just wondering whether there's a moment where we get that complete alignment with it
gets so close, but there's this it's like a spicy tango going on here. But here's one. The 17th of September.
Huh.
There would be another one if we want to look, and that's in at like it's at 17 of Cancer. And then if we want to look for another one, oh, here's another one. It's at 20 Cancer, and that's on October 18th, 19th. And I've never done, a kind of like how often is it every month on the same day, like almost this is. I don't think so, but I wouldn't swear to it. The next one, oh wow, this might be a discovery moment, is on November 17th, and that's at 24 to 5 of Cancer.
Okay.
And it's going to be opposite Pluto in the mix coming up here. So never a dull moment in the choreography of the planets.
No, there isn't. And that's, sorry for putting you on the spot there, but I'm glad that I did, because that's pulled out a really interesting piece of information that tells me that on the 4th day of the immersion, which is the 17th, we're going to have a very, very Artemisias style moment, which is of a complete alignment between the wave and the particle. I love that analogy, because now that you've explained it more.
I don't think I came up with that. I'm not sure who it was. It might have been Pam, actually. Yeah, but again, there's another alignment on the 19th of December at 28 of Capricorn. So, that's closely opposing Pluto. And so we can't make the change, the transformation we need to make if we are holding on to the past.
Right. And I think that that's a big part of what we've sort of got to try and share through this piece ahead of the immersion. We're going to be sharing this video coming out the first day of the immersion, even though we've recorded a little bit ahead of time because we wanted to get everything into place. But what's really interesting is this moment of alignment and understanding Black Moon Lilith is like, it is what it is. Don't get caught up in the emotional judgments about stuff that then allow you to get triggered by manipulating energies around you. You just come into that place of heart, alignment to higher self. Let me just take the eagle's perch perspective, breathe and go, you know what? I'm not going to get triggered by that this time. It's all okay. It is what it is. It's just a process that's happening in the paradox of duality. But from outside of that paradox, I can see the paradox for what it is. And I can smile at it. I can love it. I can send it whatever, compassion, joy, whatever is the situation, and not get triggered. And this is how we can work in a very practical way in the moment with Artemisian medicine to stop getting triggered. And once we allow ourselves the space to not get triggered, that's when a release happens and we start to heal whatever that trauma was that triggered us in the first place. So this is what the Artemisias and Black Moon Lilith, in the background, I'm starting to get her energy a lot more strongly now. I'm just like, but she's also offering this movement with the wave and the particle, where every once in a while it comes into a place of alignment.
And in Cancer, aligning very nicely with the Scorpio South Node and with Neptune in Pisces. So there's a really nice alignment that's very high quality energy here, very transformative. And again, in Cancer, sentimentality is not useful. So, we got these are the past habits. We're being invited to grow, to stretch our roots and be able to grow further. So, we can't, again, get too attached, hold on to the past or what's not working. With the Black Moon, the best strategy is, it is as it is, be willing to let go, which goes with the Scorpio South Node. And that is in any life situation. Be willing to let go of that job. Be willing to let go of that relationship. Because then, you can, you're working through your expectations, your illusions, your projections, you're letting that go. And then you come to see what it really is. You come to see that other person for who they really are, yourself, the relationship, that's like those blinders come off, like you were saying.
Right, and that's again the light in the dark half of the yin yang shadow. It's like illuminating the space, so that rather than being in the place of judgment about other people, maybe you illuminate your awareness of them, so you see them for the holistic, beautiful being that they really are, rather than the one that you kind of put into a box, maybe for some reason. You know, I'm sure you have your own reasons, whatever those situations are. But this is a time when we are being forced to change and be more in our hearts, be less judgmental, accept things for what they are, trust in how our higher selves in the universe is looking after us. And I would dare to suggest that Black Moon Lilith is actually the perfect energy to work with right now, because like you said, you know, this is a time for transformation. And if not now, then when? That's what Dandelion was teaching me during the previous immersion. If it's not now, then when, brother? What are you waiting for? You know, you're waiting for the end of the universe. It's like, this might be it, so why not do it now? You know, and I feel like this is a time to let go of those things that no longer serve us.
Yeah, what makes us happy? What brings up our vibration? It's not wrong to, you know, to choose happiness.
Right. Somehow we've been convinced.
Not a supported choice in this culture typically, but let's make it so.
Right. You know, I mean, I was chatting with a friend of mine recently, and I said, our actual default setting is happiness and joy.
Yeah.
That's our default setting. So if we're not in a place of happiness and joy, how come? Because I want to be happy. I want to be joyful. I think everybody does, really. I mean, there might be some beings out there who don't want to be happy and joyful, but I would want to question why as a Scorpio. But, you know, this is a benchmark that we can use. Am I feeling happy and in my joy or not? If I'm not, be a little bit South Node in Scorpio on yourself and start doing the self-investigation work and ask yourself why. And ask yourself why you haven't looked into it before, because normally that comes down to a lack of self-love. Why do I not love myself
all about
enough?
Venus in astrology. That's about Venus, and Venus is in Virgo now all the way to the end of the month. So, you know, this is like the simple things, you know, the beauty of a flower, you know, the you know, whatever is simple and makes you happy and is pleasurable, just the small things in life, you know.
Nice.
And your body, of course. You know,
Yes.
making sure you're feeling good, you know.
Yeah, and I think that that's a really important part of what's going on now, is have fun, be in your heart, do the things that you love, be joyful. I think I say this on every show these days, but do the things that you love, be with the people that you love, and fill your life with things that make you feel good. And we're not necessarily talking about the more Piscean addictive qualities. Sometimes it can come through, particularly with Neptune in Pisces, but do the things that make you feel good in your body, that makes your body feel good, and makes, you know, the things around you in your Taurian environment, the 3D world, that feel good. Go and spend time in the garden next to your favorite Artemisia plant. Watch it come to flower. Maybe make an essence with it, invite it into your life, or go and meet another plant, whatever calls to you, because this is all North Node in Taurus, and that's what's coming towards us, which we can allow in if we're willing to work with the South Node in Scorpio and release the poison and the shadow. And this is where we're all at now in the great scheme of things, the way I understand it. This is a great moment for humanity to illuminate itself fully.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Beautiful, huh?
And if anybody is particularly interested in the dark moon, what I'll do is it changes sign every 10 days. So what I'll do is I'll look it up and I'll put that in the notes in the Artemisia section about where it is, you know, when it changes sign and what signs it's in. I think it might be in Scorpio part of this time. So you would be especially interested in that.
And before we finish, I just want to ask you, because I know you've written a couple of books about Black Moon Lilith, where can people find those if they want to do a bit more of a deep dive? I know you said you're not an expert, but you do know quite a bit about Black Moon Lilith.
A lot of research. Yeah. So this is the first book I did, Living Lilith, 4 Dimensions of the Cosmic Feminine. And this, I talk about all of the Liliths, the, you know, the shadow moon and the asteroid Lilith and the star that's named Lilith. And then I have a book called Black Moon Lilith, which gets more into the Black Moon itself. And so, you know, you can look those up and learn. And, you know, recently I've been doing a lot more with the Moon, Venus, Black Moon, you know, trio there that I think is very helpful to look at in your own chart in terms of like how they're interacting, how they're what's strongest in your chart, what is helping make your choices, and how can you invite the others in. and understand those different aspects of your life. It's which we've just touched on with the moon, with the happiness, Venus, and self-love, and the mysteries of the black moon.
And your website is heliostar.com, isn't it? If people want to order the book.
Yes.
I'll put that in the show notes too. So, you know what? I love these chats. I'm never really quite sure what's going to come out of them when we sit down and do them. But they're always super intuitive, and I feel so much more, enriched.
Make discoveries. It's great.
Yeah, so thank you, Kelley, for sharing everything today. I think it's given a good kind of metronome chime to the beginning of the Artemisia immersion. I do suggest to everybody who's into astrology to get out your charts and see where are the placements in your South Node, and also with the Black Moon Lilith, because it might give you a little bit more of an idea of the areas that you can work consciously with the Artemisia medicine during this immersion to bring to the surface and release really quickly with the transformative tantric skills of the Scorpio energy and of the Artemisia energy, and then shift into a much more high frequency space. So thank you again, Kelley. Thank you everybody for listening to this first part of the immersion. And you'll be seeing me again very soon on the immersion, and you'll be seeing me and Kelley again reasonably soon for another Moons and Mythos, which will be on the YouTube channel. So thank you everybody. Have a great day, and look forward to seeing you all again soon.